Hello everyone. It's a big challenge to be speaking last because everyone's tired and it's been a long morning. But I hope you will still stand a few moments. My name is Jonas Sudris, as already introduced. Thank you. I'm a deputy director of the Vilnius branch of the Center of Registers, and I am responsible for the business registry, for the registry of legal entities. And here in Vilnius district, we cover almost 50% of all Lithuanian companies which are registered, as well as all foreign companies, all affiliates and all the offices of foreign companies registered in Lithuania. They are also with Vilnius department. So what I'd like to talk to you today, I would like to ask you to rethink the whole concept of the companies which most of you representing, and rethink the concept of a legal entity. For those of you who remember the story which happened almost 200 years ago, when limited liability companies were first set up in the world, those were legal fictions. How could something be created out of nothing when a business person who was back then solely responsible for both his profits and losses could transfer a part of this wealth in exchange to a paper share, and then it becomes a separate legal entity with his own name, with his own account, and with his own responsibilities. And that was legal fiction, and that was something which was discussed 200 years ago across Europe and Americas, which over the course of time became a common thing when we all understand as a common thing that we have companies, we have shares, we have limited liability, and it looks like nothing has changed, and then we have to go somewhere. But with the digital transformation of the last decade, let's say, we've seen that what we have now is we have just a digital add-on or some information technology, some computer technologies on top of an old steam train, which is still based as the paper shares of 19th century. And the question I'm asking today is, why do we still have in especially North America and some other countries, we're still using paper checks? Why is that so? Because the answer is simple. The concept of a valuable paper, which is a paper check, which is also to some extent a paper banknote, which is a bill of exchange, which is other valuable papers, including shares of the companies. Those exist, or those have legal value only it is in its first original copy. To make a photocopy, and you imagine yourself taking a banknote, making a Xerox copy of it, go to the notary, ask to approve make a notarized copy of a banknote. Will it be legal? No, that's criminal offense. You take a paper check, you make a copy of it, right? So, but then we have digital documents. We are all used to exchanging emails. We have digital signatures. We have all the digital infrastructure, and it works well. So the question is what we came up with in the registry: is there a way of having a valuable paper in a digital form, in its only copy, in its only original copy? Which basically, because what we have now, most of the company's shares are accounted at the custodians. They're accounted with the company's director. They're accounted as the open public companies are accounted. Their shares are accounted at shares repositorium. They're traded publicly only through central. You need a central trusted third party to operate it. So basically, you need custodians. You need markets, and you need regulators and everything. And then, is there a way to overcome it? And also, we have current problems existing with the registry now, such as Transfer of shares, currently. There is a written contract, in some cases in Lithuanian legislation, to transfer shares of the company. Sometimes you need a notary, but there are loopholes in the legislation that are easily overcome, that you can easily overcome the requirement of notarial transaction. Then there is a priority for purchase to other shareholders. It's in the law, but this easily can be overcome by also loopholes in the legislation. I won't be telling you all the details on that, but there are plenty of ways of doing it. Also, the accounting of shares. Usually the CEO of the company is responsible for accounting of shares. And when the CEO, and imagine a situation when a CEO is both a director of the company and he's 50% shareholder, and he's in conflict with another person who has also 50% of shares. So then you are stuck sometimes in the situations which we in the registry see every week or sometimes every day. And also, when a shareholder has his shares at a custodians, he has basically no direct control over his shares. Currently there is no way of selling his shares of a Lithuanian company of two business people sitting in a cafe in France, or do it over the internet without a notary sometimes. So also we have some more daily challenges which we need to overcome. We don't have a central shares registry, let's say. There is no such thing in Lithuania. But the company is responsible of reporting the rules, reporting the composition of its shareholders to the registry, and sometimes companies do not follow that requirement. Also, we see situations where shares of the companies are transferred using retrospective dates. Basically, you don't have the actual data on when the contract was concluded. We have situations where companies are being stolen by presenting forged documents to the registry. And these sometimes happen with decent and reputable companies. And even though we talk out loud about it, we employ more and more security and safety measures, but on one hand, you make it more difficult for the business to operate, and you make it more difficult for investors to come, and then for the company's shares to be tackled with. And then there's another problem which is dumping of shares. Basically, when a company is facing, let's say, bankruptcy situation, they sometimes avoid their duties to go through bankruptcy procedures. They found some fake passport of some citizen from non-European country, and then present the documents basically with false information. And then they end up that the law enforcement finds out that this company was dumped to some third-party person 5 years ago, and there is nothing to do with them about it. So, also the current blockchain era, the beginning of blockchain era, also is facing a number of issues regarding to the current system of limited liability companies. We are hearing about securities on blockchain. We are hearing about tokenization of assets. We are hearing about a number of projects which somehow try to fit into existing regulation, try to access global funding resources through blockchain, through issuing tokens, through issuing a number of all different instruments. But there is no legal way. I have seen a number of attempts, but I haven't seen a single successful attempt of issuing securities on blockchain, because it's just simply impossible. Why? The answer is pretty simple. A company, a legal entity, a security are terms of legal kingdom, and blockchain and tokens and cryptography are terms of mathematics and computer science. So you cannot, by just presenting a new technology, deny legal requirements. So that's why we thought, how could we change the legal environment the smallest way possible to enable trading securities on blockchain? How could we do that in Lithuania? And Lithuania should appear to be a perfect place of probably being the first in the world to do it. So the innovation which we're working now at the registry is digital share certificate. Basically, now some of you still know paper shares. Most of the companies operate their shares on shares accounts and at custodians. But what we propose is going back to the original shares, but put them on the blockchain in the form of digital share certificate, which would only exist in its first original form on the blockchain, which could be a separate layer. It's not a centralized database of shares. It's a public blockchain which exists separately from the registry, but it stands next to the registry, in between the shareholder and the registry. So, in the digital share certificate, you should have all the same data which you have on a classical paper share, which is the name of the company, the amount of shares it represents, the value of those shares, and so on and so forth, and probably some encrypted data, which is owner's personal data to comply with GDPR requirements, and also some restrictions, which is the new thing which you don't usually have in classical way. Imagine the court issues a seizure of shares, or a court issues a report on splitting of shares in case of shareholders' divorce and so forth. And the benefit for that would be so the shareholder has always a direct access to his shares. He can do the transfer of shares independently from the custodian. He can mortgage all the shares or part of the shares of this company. The company also, on the other hand, the company always will then know the current composition of its shareholders. Even the shares of the company can be transferred 5 times a day. And then the company will always know if there is any restrictions written onto particular share certificate. If the particular shareholder has, let's say, voting rights in the current gathering of shareholders. Also, the benefits of digital share certificate, what we expect is so the transfer of shares, the investment contracts, they're all digitally signed and timestamped, which makes transfer of shares and using retrospective date impossible. You always see the true composition of shareholders at all times. The stealing and dumping of shares becomes technically impossible. And then, moreover, you can issue different kinds of shares and other securities on the same blockchain. Company could issue bonds using the same technology. Company could issue different classes of shares, let's say with different voting power, with different voting weights. For some of them shares for the original, for the principal shareholders, another for financial investors, and so on and so forth. So basically this platform could make security ICOs possible. And so it may sound very, very modern and very nice, but it's still in the development of the concept level. And so we've defined the concept within the Center of Registers, within the company registry. We have modified this concept a little bit together with the Ministry of Economy. We have been talking to this with the central bank as well. And we are now in, let's say, the work in progress. We are now selecting a technology. We want to select an open source technology, so it will be both fast, cheap, and scalable. So then we would like to go to sandbox trials and then through the legislation process. We are lucky that Ministry of Economy is responsible for adopting the law on limited companies, which requires at current evaluation, which requires very little change basically in the law to make this platform possible. And all the major stakeholders, which include the registry, the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Finance, and the Bank of Lithuania, they're all very welcome with this idea. We've been talking about this since, I think, last December. And we plan to probably we'll want to launch the first sandboxes probably by the end of this year even. So, but it's not as bright, or it may sound really bright and easy, but there are some challenges, of course, to overcome. I've already mentioned the technology. We're looking at different open source blockchains available on the market currently. We are also looking at we will be looking also at the blockchain which is being in development by the Bank of Lithuania at the moment. But the biggest challenge is the international component of all this. Because we are spoiled in Lithuania with digital identities here. We all have mobile digital signatures on our mobile phones or on our smart cards or with our banking IDs. But what if a Lithuanian company is owned by a Malaysian company wants to transfer his shares to a Japanese investor? So we need to identify foreign nationals and foreign companies and their representatives with the same level of security as we identify our own citizens. So this basically means that we need to create an additional layer of identification, which is also a challenge. I think the biggest challenge at the moment to make this technology work. So I think I won't be taking too much time of yours. I think I fit in my time frame. Yep, and I would be more than happy to answer all your questions through the lunch, and thank you for your attention.